All right, thanks for listening to the Elias Macko Show. I do want to tell you it's a big day on the Elias Macko Show. We have major news about the show. We're going to do that in the third hour of the program, so just keep it locked. We're having a fun, full 3-hour show this morning. We're going to begin this hour of the program with Tom Mulcair. Now, the NDP faces a critical crossroads after its worst electoral defeat ever, capturing just 6% of the vote in April. And Tom Mulcair, the former leader of the NDP, he recently penned a piece on the CTV News website. It's titled, "Opportunity Knocks for the NDP. Will they answer?" Let's find out more. Tom's on the line. Hey, Tom, thanks for doing this with us this morning.
Great to be with you, Elias.
So I'm going to start off with this, Tom. Boy, it seems like you still really, really care about your old party. I mean, how much do you care about your old party?
Well, you can't not care about a group of people and some ideas that you worked so hard for over the years. I'm not involved in the party directly anymore. That's why I feel I can give an outsider's view now, a more objective view of what went wrong in the last campaign and what perhaps could make life easier for them in the next one if they change a few things.
So, as you point out, they got to rebuild credibility. They need to present like a unified, bilingual front to Canadians. Easier said than done, Tom. How do they do it?
Well, the first thing they have to do is to realize why things went so badly in the last election. For that, for the NDP to be down to 6% of the vote across Canada is nowhere near where they were under Jack Layton or me or indeed other leaders before. They lost party status once before, but they still did better than they did this time around. So what did go wrong? I put it squarely on something that I had identified very early on as soon as they did it. The day they signed that so-called deal with the Liberals, they were going to support them on confidence motion and money bills, so confidence in supply. It wasn't going to work. How do you go to the doorstep, Elias, and tell people, oh, by the way, you're an NDP or you have to vote NDP. Don't vote Liberal, whatever you do. What's your argument for saying that when all of the Liberal MPs have been voting? I'm sorry, all of the NDP MPs have been voting with the Liberals since 3 years. So, I mean, that's the biggest problem that they've got right now, is to come to grips with that. But the people who were behind that move to hop into the sack with Trudeau's Liberals, they're all still there, so they're not going to admit that they were wrong. And I think that that's another part of the problem. They need some changes at the top. I don't know if you caught this, but there were 3. Now they're down to 7 MPs.
Yeah.
3 of the 7 MPs wrote a letter to the party saying, hey, we'd like to be properly consulted on who the interim leader should be. Well, they were turned away. They were just dismissed. They said, no, we get to decide this. Those 3 people happen to be the only 3 racialized women in the caucus. And they had signed that letter, and they were turned down flat. When the party has a proud history of inclusiveness and respecting diversity, aren't you showing that that's a bit of a facade if you're turning down the only racialized women in the caucus and saying, no, we're not even going to find a few minutes to sit down and have a meeting with you and listen to at least your point of view?
Mm-hmm. And on that front, there seems to be so many contentious issues internally. And as you point out in your piece, you make it a big chunk of your piece, right? You bring up the Israel-Palestinian conflict.
Right.
And I've said it on this show, like, I've been scratching my head at times. Like Canadians have lots of issues, right? Housing and all this stuff and working class stuff. And the amount of time that the NDP has spent on Israel-Palestine, I've always been scratching my head, whether it's Craig Sauvé running in the by-election with the pamphlets or whatever it is, their tweets.
With the Palestinian flag on the front of his pamphlet, yeah.
So, like,
and that, by the way, that probably cost him the by-election. Mm-hmm. And he still doesn't understand that. I love Craig Sauvé. He's a great guy. But when I saw that, I said, okay, they've collectively lost their senses, the people who have been running his campaign. I talked to them after, by the way, Elias, and I said, what went through your minds? And they said, well, no, we thought a lot of people would agree with us. I said, yeah, but what about all the people who don't agree with you? That's part of the equation when you're trying to figure out what the bottom line is.
But he's not alone. I mean, the thing is, if it was one candidate, but it seems pervasive. You go down the ranks of the MPs, they are wading into this stuff that for a lot of Canadian voters says you care more about something on the other side of the world than you care about my financial situation.
True, and there's going to be lots to talk about on the Canadian front because Prime Minister Carney has made no bones about the fact that he's going to have to cut deeply in the expenses of the Canadian government, something that Trudeau refused to do. But on the issue of Israel-Palestine, it was almost as if it was a race amongst the MPs to come up with their own positions. I remember back when I was Jack's Quebec lieutenant and his deputy leader, a key member of caucus said she was in favor of boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. Well, that was not at all the party policy. And Jack, hauled her in and said, look, when you're sitting around the caucus table, you're absolutely entitled to your own positions and opinions. But publicly, the party has to express itself with one voice. You don't get to make up your own policy, even though you're allowed to have your own opinions. And that's what's not happening in the NDP now. When you go to the Voters Alliance and you say, this is our party, this is our position, this is what we stand for, that has to mean something. But when everybody's allowed to have their own opinion, Canadians are saying, okay, what would I be voting for? And by the way, you're quite right, and I agree with you. Canadians have a much more nuanced position on this, very much like the NDP did under Jack Layton, very balanced approach. And if you don't have any credibility on this issue, and if it's totally one-sided and very strident to please just a tiny fringe of your base, you're going to be excluded from the main conversation of Canadian politics. And that's also what's happening to the NDP right now, although they don't recognize it.
We're with Tom Mulcair, of course. You know him and love him here on CJAD 800. And, of course, as former leader of the NDP, he recently penned a piece on ctvnews.ca about what the NDP should do to rebuild itself. Tom, I want to get to the Quebec side of things. Yes. Because it seems like Quebec, the province, how we are on so many social issues, it seems like Quebec would be a province where the NDP should flourish on the federal level. That's not always been the case. How important is it on bilingualism and Quebec outreach for the future of the party?
Well, it's the future of the party across the country because, of course, the 8 million Canadians who have French as their first language want to have a leader of a national party who can speak both languages. But beyond that, all Canadians have to see in a party leader that aspires to form government, or at least says that it does, they have to see somebody who understands that relationship between the majority English-speaking population and the minority French-speaking population in Canada. Now, if the NDP were to contrive to put in a leader who can't speak French, and by the way, several of the people who are throwing their hat in the ring are not bilingual at all, like starting with Abbey Lewis, who literally can't speak French at all, but he thinks he's got a good chance because he can talk to that more radical fringe base that he thinks it should be the party. Well, good luck with that. I don't think that the average Canadian, again, is going to feel comfortable with a party saying, by the way, we want to form government, but we would never be able to talk to a large chunk of the Canadian population.
Tom, are you worried that the more extremist factions within the NDP will win this battle? I mean, some of the stuff I see, some of the candidates and their thoughts are way out there, but it seems like what's happening in some left movements is the more extreme, the better. Are you worried about that?
Absolutely. And what happened with Jack, he professionalized the party. That didn't just mean having policies that could connect with a larger, scope of Canadian voting public. But Jack also was able to impose discipline on the party. There had been a time when there were only a few MPs, where everybody would just hop in front of the microphones on any given day and come up with something because they would hope to make the news with that. Well, that's a strategy when your only purpose is to get a clip on the news. But if your purpose is to actually have policies that can connect with people that could eventually become government policies because you aspire to that, then there's no chance of getting there with what they're doing now. The NDP is a party of power. It's been in power in 6 different provinces. Right now, it has strong, competent, good governments in British Columbia and in Manitoba. They're really good governments, and they're respected as such. But if they continue down the road of saying, okay, we're going to mollycoddle the fringes, we're going to talk to the more extreme elements, we're going to come up with policies, we don't care if they connect with the average Canadian voters because we think we're right on these things. Well, they're just going to have any hope of forming a government put on the back burners. In 2011, Jack and I broke through. I mean, we got 59 seats in Quebec, for heaven's sakes, and over 100 across Canada, and we were the official opposition. We fell short in the next election, but part of that is on the table right now. Trudeau had said he was going to run deficits every year, and guess what? It's one of the few promises he kept. There were massive government deficits, and we're still trying to deal with that today. Carney's stuck with that. He's going to have to make decisions. They are absolutely essential, by the way, to reduce government spending in Canada. But they're going to be unpopular with a lot of Canadians.
So, you're right.
And it's going to give the NDP, if they're smart, the opportunity to talk to a larger swath of the Canadian voting public. But are they going to do that, or are they going to double down on working around the edges? what happened with Elizabeth May and the Green Party is a really instructive case. At some point, the very anti-Israel fringes coalesced around the Green Party. They saw in the Green Party a vehicle to try to push forward some of their radical views. Well, guess what? It fell really flat, and it hurt her credibility, and it hurt her party. Yeah. She's back to being a party of one. Yeah. If the NDP wants to be a party of one, they'll continue down this path. If they want to be a party that can reach out, they'll have policies where they can talk to all Canadians and actually have a chance of doing something.
The article on the CTV News website, the piece is called Opportunity Knocks for the NDP. Will they answer? Go read it. The author, of course, none other than Tom Mulcair. Tom, have a great vacation, rest of your summer.
All the best to you, Elias, right. and to the whole team at CJAD.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
We miss your voice, so we'll hear you again real soon.